Hello, my name is Bruce Gillette. I'm chair of the Justice in Mission and Ministry team for Susquehanna Presbytery and also finishing up my term of service as moderator for Presbyterians for Earth Care. We're grateful for both groups sponsoring this presentation. I've got to know Chris Berger over the last 6 years as a member of Susquehanna Valley Presbytery, where he serves as the co-stated clerk. If you look online, you'll see his name shows up in many different capacities. We are very grateful for his giving time today to talk about very important subject of relating to the waste crisis, the climate crisis, and what we can do about it individually and maybe a bit in our churches as well. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Loving God, you call us to be stewards of your creation. You have blessed us with such a wonderful world. Too often we misuse it, we exploit it, and we're not good stewards. We pray that you will guide us and your church in all the more faithfully caring for this beautiful home that we share, not only with one another, but for generations to come. We ask your blessing on Chris, on his family, and on the many ways he serves your church and inspires people to care for your creation. Bless him now in this presentation. We pray it in the name of the head of the church, our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Chris, take it away, please.
Okay. Go to share, and go into. Okay, everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. Breaking down the silos, connecting the dots between the waste crisis and the climate crisis. And thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I just want to start off by saying, giving a little background on why I've gotten into really both of these areas, and also to emphasize that I'm not asking anybody to do anything that I'm unwilling to do myself. And our commitment, I say our because it's both my wife and I really started on this journey back in April 22nd of 1970, first Earth Day. That was all about celebrating the richness and beauty of the planet and raising awareness about the need to protect the planet and preserve its ability to sustain life. Many used the opportunity to protest and demand that the government should enact legislation to protect the environment and that businesses should act more responsibly. And not that my wife and I disagreed with any of that, but we took the opportunity to ask ourselves, well, shouldn't we be taking responsibility for our own actions? And then just naturally following from that, well, what was our biggest personal impact that we had on the environment? And for us anyway, we came up with two big things, the waste we produced and the non-renewable energy we consumed. And so from that first Earth Day, we made basically two commitments. One was that we'd not buy anything we are unwilling to take responsibility for. There's a lot in that, and this would be a whole other presentation, but basically, bottom line, it means that the disposal is really not an option, because disposal is really, when you put your bag of waste on the curb, it doesn't magically disappear. It goes somewhere. So disposal really shifts the consequences to someone else. It's not really taking responsibility for that uh, for that waste. So basically, we started on this journey where we reuse, recycle, and compost, and we avoid what we can't reuse, recycle, and compost. That's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. Last time we took our trash to the landfill was the spring of 1992. And that's what we've produced since 1992. All our waste fits into that one grocery bag. And 10 of those years, by the way, we were still a family of four. We were since an empty nest of, so not all of that is from a family of four, but 10 of those years did include our two daughters as well. The other commitment we made is that we will strive to become more energy efficient and use renewable energy whenever possible. So again, this was when we were first just renting, and we did what we could when we were renting. But in 1978, I was able to design and build our house, designed for energy efficiency, and at this point, all powered with renewables, passive geothermal, wind, hydro, and then passive and active solar. No wind no wood, by the way, because some people say, "Well, you must be burning with wood." Well, I'm asthmatic, and actually, wood is off the table anyway, so it's not burning wood. Anyway, and this is just a picture of a house. Obviously, again, this would be a whole other presentation. But just a lot of stuff went into building that house to make it more energy efficient. And then to top it all off in 2021, we got ourselves an EV, a Ford Mach-E. And so that kind of completes the picture for us in terms of getting off of fossil fuels. Anyway, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, probably most of you know this, the whole thing about greenhouse effect. When you think about how in greenhouses itself, the glass is acting to keep heat inside the area where you're trying to grow plants. And basically, greenhouse gases in our atmosphere are achieving the same purpose. Now, we actually would want some greenhouse gases to be present because otherwise we'd just be a frozen planet. But there is such a thing as too much greenhouse gases, and that's what we're facing today. But I just wanted to call attention to the fact that back 4 billion years ago, we were a warm planet. Water covered most of the planet. The atmosphere actually had 40 times more CO2, 20 times less oxygen, and 42 times more water vapor. It was much warmer than it is today. And it was actually a great planet for plants, algae, and fish. And what happened since then was basically a lot of plant growth, a lot of algae growth. Devonian period was considered the age of fish, where and these living organisms lived and died and basically sequestered carbon, pulled the carbon out of the atmosphere and introduced much more oxygen. And when those organisms were covered, they would decay, and basically that became the fossil fuels that we have today. That created those deposits of fossil fuels in a number of different forms. But basically, it evolved the planet in that sequestering of carbon changed the Earth atmosphere from a high CO2 content but made the planet much more hospitable to life forms today. And basically, we're not destroying the planet. I disagree with a lot of my environmentalist friends when they talk in terms of, well, we're destroying the planet. We're not destroying the planet because, again, the planet existed quite nicely back 400 billion years ago. But it's much more accurate to say we're devolving the planet. We changed that planet. That planet was changed to a much more conducive planet for higher life forms, and we're just turning back the process. So most people are familiar with this graph where basically and obviously this is almost stating the obvious. This is unsustainable over the long haul, where the CO2 content in the atmosphere had reached a plateau and maintained it an even keel, but ever since the 1800s, pretty much in line with when we started to industrialize our activities, that CO2 content started to rise. What we don't pay attention, and obviously we're releasing carbon faster than the planet is sequestering the carbon. Theoretically, we could burn some carbon, but you can't do it faster than the planet is sequestering the carbon, and of course we're reducing the planet's ability to sequester carbon too when we destroy like the rainforest and things like that. But I want to introduce a few other greenhouse gases that aren't that we don't pay a lot of attention to. One being methane and one being nitrous oxide. And those two greenhouse gases are also rising along with the CO2 at pretty much the same rates, not surprising. So anyway, what I'm going to do today is address some of the ways, obviously not all the ways, but some of the ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But this is much more focused on how we do it through addressing the waste crisis. And I'll basically cover three things. One, we should be reducing burning of fossil fuels by replacing an extractive economy with a circular economy. We should be curtailing the use of plastics along with increasing recyclability of plastics, and certainly avoiding the use of plastic as a fuel source. And then finally, we need to be reducing methane generation through our landfills by simply banning organics at landfills. And this is kind of the meat of what I'm going to be going through for the rest of the presentation. So let's deal first with reducing burning of fossil fuels by replacing an extractive economy with a circular economy. You know, when you think of how we utilize resources today, we extract the resource, we process the resource, we use that resource too many times, a one-time use, and then what do? We dispose of that of the resource. Clearly unsustainable. This linear approach to utilizing resources is unsustainable. In a finite world with finite resources, you cannot continue to use resources in this fashion. And both the extraction and the disposal sides have negative impacts. In a much more broader presentation on zero waste, I'd be going into a lot of those negative impacts, but I just want to focus on one today, and that is what energy is used to extract those resources. So here's a pie chart of US energy use. 18% going to transportation, 32% going to building use, 12% just to provide us with food. But the biggest piece of the pie is providing those consumer products that we use. I call this embedded energy. And of course, certainly cutting back on buying of stuff yields direct energy savings. But in addition to that, half of that 38% is energy is used to extract and process raw materials. So recycling materials use 3 to 20% less energy than using virgin materials. And even though it takes some energy to recycle, we could be saving 12% of our energy simply by recycling, reusing and recycling all that stuff we're consuming. So instead of after using it, we could recover it and ideally reuse it. And if we can't do that, we should at least be reusing it and cutting back on the extraction and the disposal of that material. And that is referred to as a circular economy. And we have a potential to reduce our energy use by 12% or more simply by switching the way we utilize resources. So that's one way of that addressing the waste crisis can also address our climate crisis. Moving on to curtailing the use of plastic. That's kind of the negative side, and again, disposal has a whole bunch of negatives associated with it, but we're going to focus on one, the plastics. And incinerating collected use of plastics, just so people know, as we push back and try to reduce our use of fossil fuels, the fossil fuel industry has a plan B. And if you thought we had a lot of plastics in our lives now, just wait until they're pressed to reduce the fossil fuel for energy. They still want to be in business. So their plan B is to produce even more plastics and then in turn collect them. And unfortunately, a lot of recycling programs that have the fossil fuel industry behind it, they're basically collecting that plastic and burning it. Doesn't really do much for our ability to address the climate change. Incineration does not make waste disappear. It basically takes our bag and puts it into a black box, if you will. But it doesn't make it disappear. It basically goes into the fly ash and bottom ash, and a good portion of it goes into the atmosphere. It doesn't go away. It just goes, takes on a different form. It degrades and rules out the resource utility of whatever you put in there. And it gets disposed of into the landfills and disposed into the air. So think of plastic as sequestered carbon, to be recycled, not to be burned. Definitely, we should be working on reducing plastics, but we certainly shouldn't be burning it because that obviously defeats the whole thing about sequestering carbon. Well, in this setting, I'd be remiss not to lift up the fact that Presbyterians for Earth Care, well, Susquehanna Valley introduced an overture in which the Presbyterians for Earth Care did a lot of work to help promote that pushes us all as a church community to become free of plastic pollution. And there's a whole list of what that overture included. You probably can't read much of it, but it basically the idea is to encourage in all our settings to commit to changing from a disposable culture to reusable, sustainable one, and certainly concentrating on plastics, which is becoming a bigger and bigger problem in our society and our world. So finally, I want to look at methane. that chart I showed you earlier, that's tracking just like CO2 in terms of increasing in our environment. And basically, we want to do that by burning organics from landfills. So just so you know, CO2 is measured in two different ways, unfortunately, because the EPA kind of artificially, really, they put methane on a 100-year time frame, just like CO2. But actually, that diminishes the impact of methane because methane has a much shorter lifespan than CO2 in the atmosphere, and will do all its damage in a much shorter time frame. So that has prompted the UN and their International Panel on Climate Change to recalculate to the point that methane, in their way of thinking, is 79 to 105 times more potent than CO2 when it gets into our atmosphere. When it comes to greenhouse gas impacts. So what does that do? This would be how the EPA would calculate the global warming contribution from the three major gases, greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. But if you calculated it the way the IPCC calculates it, methane becomes 43% of the global warming contribution. Still not quite as much as carbon dioxide, but pretty darn close to it. So it's no small matter. And actually, waste landfills used to be the biggest contributor to anthropogenic sources of methane. Over the past 10, 15 years, however, we've actually, natural gas systems have risen to the top. And that's because we've basically run through all our pockets of natural gas to be extracted. And now we're going into a process called fracking, which leaks a lot more methane in the process of extraction of the gas. And also just simply because we have all this intricate gas distribution systems that are aging and leaking. All told, our use of natural gas is the biggest contributor to methane, but landfills are a close second. So, what do we dispose of typically? This is kind of the makeup of our waste stream, if you will. And the big takeaway here is 73% of it is organic. Keep that in mind as I go forward because this is going to be important. We already talked about incineration. The other big, actually even bigger way we deal with waste in our society is through landfills. And what are landfills? They're basically holes in the ground. They're all nicely lined, if done properly, with what's called dual composite liners, where they basically, and it's all about protecting the groundwater from the waste we put into these landfills. And the top layer is designed to collect leachate, which is the liquid that's created when moisture seeps through that waste. It picks up all the contaminants and it becomes part of this what's called leachate. And they have pipes in the bottoms of the landfills to collect that leachate. And then, by the way, the second layer is just to design. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. But then, of course, we fill that hole with waste, and the leachate goes to sewage treatment plants. And then the bottom layer is designed to just monitor. So if you start seeing leachate in the second layer, you know you have a leak in the top layer, and it means you need to go back in and repair that leak. And you can imagine that's a pretty onerous uh, project to repair leaks in a liner of a landfill. And typically the cost of that is astronomical and never calculated in the cost of using a landfill. So it's basically a cost that future generations will be faced with. But anyway, when the landfill is filled up, it's capped, and then they're required to put methane collectors on. And before they would just vent the methane, but EPA has come in and said, well, you're at least going to have to flare, burn it off, burn that methane. That obviously creates CO2, but at least as we've seen, CO2 is a lot less potent a greenhouse gas than the methane. So that's at least something. And then some landfills actually try to capture that methane and use it for energy, uh, but not very effectively, as we shall see. So landfills are basically monuments to our society's wastefulness and inefficiency. That's how I see them. They're monuments to society's mismanagement of resources. They're basically taking that bag of trash again and putting it into one big giant bag, all nicely lined and capped, but and giving the illusion that we're dealing with the waste, but all we're really doing is warehousing the waste. In 2022, landfills contributed to 3.7 million metric tons of methane, or about 3 and 11 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents using the IPCC formula. And that's roughly equivalent to annual emissions of driving 70 million gas-powered vehicles a year, or operating 83 coal-fired power plants a year. And just to give perspective there, that's almost half of our equivalent to almost half of our coal power plants in the US. So this is no small thing. And even the best, I mentioned some landfills try to capture that methane and use it for energy, but even the best landfills capture only about 20 to 25% of the methane. They're very unwieldy structures, and for reasons that I'm not going to go into deeply, the fact of the matter is most of the methane is generated when the landfill's gas capture is least effective, when it's not completely capped, or the caps have broken down, and it's most efficient when the gas capture is least when methane is least produced. So overall, they're only about 20 to 25% effective. Nice idea, but it just doesn't work. So again, methane gas is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and landfills are the largest anthropogenic source of this gas in the atmosphere. The methane is generated by it. The only reason why methane is generated in landfills is because we're putting organics into landfills. So the only real effective way to avoid methane emissions from landfills is to ban organics. We shouldn't be putting organics into landfills. We should be working to do away with landfills altogether, but certainly putting organics into landfills instead of composters is, to no pun intended, is a complete waste. So anyway, I really encourage communities to put in place what I refer to as resource recovery parks. This is moving from waste management to resource management. And these are all components of a resource recovery park, but just keep in mind they don't have to exist all together in one park. There's some nice synergies that are created if you can create these parks. But as long as you have like a material recovery facility, commonly referred to as a MRF, you need a charm, a center for hard to recycle materials that would include the electronics and appliances that have to be deconstructed uh, uh, in order for that material. Certainly, you should have repair and reuse centers in your communities. So we're not disposing of them, or it's even a higher use than a higher strategy than recycling. And then finally, a composting facility, either aerobic or anaerobic. Uh, it's good to have a facility to deal specifically with construction and demolition because that's a specific type of waste stream that again could be processed for a lot of recycled materials. If you put all that together, you should get your waste not to zero exactly, but pretty darn close, about 4%. Uh, and I always encourage people to really zero in on that and analyze it because those are your problem materials. And if you can see what's causing a big problem after you've done all that other stuff, maybe you could we can change practices and even get rid of that 4%. Again, this is not anything you have to put all in one place, but any community should have this as your basic infrastructure for recovering material instead of uh, having a waste department. So Bruce had asked me to quickly go through some things that we can do as individuals and as our communities to reduce our carbon footprint. And it won't surprise you after all of which I just said, number one on my list is to reduce, recycle, and compost. Um, Second would be changing our eating habits. Third is practice energy conservation. Four is to make our homes more energy efficient, make them as energy efficient as possible. Five, electrify all your home equipment and appliances. That includes cooking, heating, and hot water. Six, electrify your transportation. And finally, seven, none, all of the above would not make any sense unless unless you're ensuring that your electricity comes from renewable sources. So reuse, recycle, and compost, we've pretty much gone through that. And the reasons why we want to do that, because we can basically save 12% of our energy use and reduce that embedded energy. You know, we pay so much attention to uh, reducing the energy use at our homes and our transportation, and we forget the embedded energy that's represented by all that stuff we buy. So that's number one on my list to that people can do to address climate change. Uh, Use materials more wisely, reuse, recycle, and compost, avoid what you can't reuse, recycle, and compost. It's as simple and complex as that. And as a societal level, we need to substitute virgin material with recycled material and provide that recovery infrastructure that I just talked about. In changing eating habits, 12% of our energy is devoted to that. There's a lot of waste in our food providing system. 40% of our food is wasted. Uh, we should so we should let we should certainly waste less food. We should avoid purchasing processed food. We should buy food grown more locally and cut back on meat. Ideally, we would all become vegetarians, but and I have to confess, I'm not even a vegetarian. But we've certainly we don't eat a lot of meat, and we certainly don't eat much beef at all because beef. I have a chart that go into more detail, but at bottom line is beef is amazingly more energy. It takes a lot more energy to produce beef than any other meat product out there. Uh, Practice energy conservation and make your home more energy efficient. That's that building piece that a lot of people focus on. And again, it's not it's important. I just like to make sure that we also include that embedded energy that too often is ignored. Uh, I and this is a whole other topic, obviously a whole other presentation, but quickly, I like to use just to uh, make the point conservation versus efficiency. You take your 60-watt legacy incandescent bulb and replace it with LED lighting, which is what you should do. You would save a lot of energy uh, by doing that. That's efficiency. Conservation and yeah, 8.5 watts does the same with less. Conservation is simply turning off the lights when you don't need it. So that's kind of a quick and dirty way to explain the difference between efficiency and conservation. Because turning off the lights is 0 watts. Um, Everybody should uh, do energy audits on their home. In New York State, those energy audits are free. I don't know what it is in other states. Probably not all states are as progressive as New York State, but no matter what, if it's free or not, you'll be saving money at the end if you do an energy audit and figuring out where your heat is being lost. And there's a couple of there's a way to measure infiltration, but also conduction of your home. You're obviously not going to read all this, but this basically is there's mechanical measures, there's paying attention to the building shell and electric base load, but all these things will save money in the long haul, and a lot of
First,
them, yeah.
um, we might mention the Inflation Reduction Act provides federal funding right now for a number of these things, correct?
That is correct, and but who knows how long that's going to stick around. There's a lot of concern over that going away. Uh, and if there's some people that they're worried that if you're not already in the system doing that, it's going to be taken away. But who knows? But even if it wasn't there, you could save money over the long haul. There's upfront costs and all this. That's to be sure. But at the end of the day, you actually save money by doing this stuff. And not only that, but actually increasing the comfort of your home and safety of your home and improves indoor air quality. So there's more than just not there's more than just reducing your energy emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, more than saving money. It's just you're going to have a much more comfortable, safe home with better air quality besides. Electrify all your home equipment and appliances, and that includes the cooking, heating, and hot water. I mean, luckily, a lot of these things are electrified already. The lighting, the appliances in your home, they all run on electricity. Refrigerator, uh, refrigerators, by the way, I ask when I do presentations on energy. Uh, I asked because the technology used most often to replace
I'm listening to.
space heating is heat pumps. And I asked people, well, how many people have heat pumps in their home? And really, everybody should be raising their hand because they have a refrigerator. And because refrigerators are basically heat pumps. If people didn't understand what heat pumps did, that's what refrigerators are, is heat pumps. Uh, so a good strategy for space heating in this instance is to basically replace your furnace with a heat pump. Much more efficient, again, saves money in the long run. Another way, by the way, is through radiant heat, which is actually what I have in my house because I built my house long before. Well, heat pumps were out there, but they were inefficient and very costly. So I went with radiant, which is another option to electrify your heating. But anyway, uh, hot water can be heated with electricity or heat pumps as well. And cooking, well, you always had electric stoves out there, and some people swear by them. But a lot of people like their gas stoves. Well, now you have induction stoves, and induction stoves are electric, run by electric, and they're actually much easier to control than gas stoves even. I mean, that's why people tend to like their gas stoves because there's a lot more better control over it. But the induction stoves even have more control than the gas stoves. So consider switching if you haven't already. I would, even if I had an electric stove, the traditional electric stoves, I would consider switching to uh, induction stove. They're amazing cooking units. Electrify your transportation. That's 18%. Gas-powered vehicles are very inefficient. Only about 20% of the energy you put into your vehicle is turned into energy to move your move the vehicle. There's a lot of waste, a lot of energy lost through the engine, a lot of energy in internal combustion engines are just simply very inefficient use of energy in and of itself. There's a lot of energy lost through braking and energy lost through idling, though some of the more modern ICE cars do cycle off when they're idling. So they've at least done that, but that's only about 3% of the energy anyway. So they haven't done a lot to increase the efficiency. So there's basically three types of electrified vehicles out there, because electrified vehicles include hybrids and plug-in hybrids. To tell you that hybrids basically use the gasoline engine to charge the battery, which never made a whole lot of sense to me if you're at least not plugging in your vehicle because basically you're still using gas to a high degree. Um, at least with a plug-in hybrid, and that that can operate without a gasoline engine for short distances. And if you're in an urban or suburban area and your commute is relatively short, it's conceivable that your daily use, you wouldn't ever have to use that gas engine. You'd only be using it on long haul. And actually, that's that's in from what I understand, that's typically why anybody would do a hybrid anyways, because they have what's called range anxiety for long car trips. I it's kind of it's kind of a misnomer, to be honest, uh, but it's out there. We should acknowledge that there's range anxiety out there. For myself, I live out in a rural area, so there was no way I could use even a plug-in hybrid to basically provide my daily transportation needs without relying on my gas-powered, the gas engine in the hybrid. So I went with a total electric vehicle. And I have a whole other presentation on that. But I'll just leave it at that. The other thing we should be doing is electrifying our transportation. When you're really ready to stop fossil fuels, you're gonna go over to EVs. And then finally, yeah, Bruce, I'm good. You're on mute.
Trying to save energy by being on mute. The even better use for electrical is electrical bikes. They are getting incredibly popular. So,
They are.
if
They
that
are.
works for your lifestyle, that can be very useful.
Yeah. I should include that. I don't think of that because, again, I'm out in a rural area and the electric bikes, I could use an electric bike. I've actually ridden them, and one of my friends is actually trying to get me to go into an electric bike too. Uh, but it's certainly a nice option and a growing option, as you say. You're absolutely right. Um, I just want to end with the fact that, if you're electrifying your home and electrifying your transportation, but your energy, your electricity is still coming from fossil fuels, so you really haven't gained an awful lot. So you want to ensure that your electricity itself is coming from a renewable source. And you can do that by a number of different ways. Uh, you, the, Probably the easiest way is basically use the option, and I think this is true across the country. It's certainly true in New York State, but every electric customer has the option of deciding where they want to get their electricity from. And there's not a lot, but there's a growing number of supply companies that wield uh, renewable energy, electricity generated by solar, wind, or hydro. And you can take advantage of that. And this fluctuates off and on. Like when I first got into my ESCO from renewables, it actually cost a little more, but I was willing to pay that. Currently, it actually costs less than fossil fuel generated electricity, 5 to 10%. So it's almost like a no-brainer, but you got to do it. If you let the electricity company itself decide for you, they're going to still deliver fossil fuel generated electricity. But that's the easiest way for anybody to change over to their electric source from renewables. Another option is lease solar. That is, if you don't have the upfront costs for your solar, you can actually, there's companies that will basically lease your roof, put solar panels on, uh, and then sell you the electricity from the solar panels. So it it's for people who can't afford the upfront cost of solar, but it still gets you about 20% savings when you go that route. Another route is to invest in community solar farms. Those are solar cooperatives, and there you can save 50 to 60% savings. You own basically part of that solar farm in the process. Uh, and and finally, and this is the way I went, was I put solar panels on our roof. Or if you have some land and don't want to put it on the roof, you can put it basically in your yard. And that also will yield 50 to 60% savings. So that's it. I mean, kind of a bird's eye view of how to do it. Obviously, there's a lot of detail behind that that I just don't have that's a whole other presentation on 7 steps to reduce your energy use, and I'd be glad to share that some other time. But I'd be glad to, and maybe we have a few moments to go into that a little more detail if people have questions
Let's
around
see
that.
if there are questions. Any questions?
Yeah, sharing so we can see everybody.
Chris, this was excellent. It really was a wonderful. There were several different things that I realized I need to work on, as well as we as a nation.
Yeah, I'm just struck because I'm part of a lot of groups that they're either focused on one area or the other, the waste crisis or the climate crisis, and very little understanding of how they're connected and how addressing one will help address the other.
We have a raised hand from Jane, who is the vice moderator of PEC. What's your question, Jane?
Yeah, Chris, I have never heard of burning plastics for energy. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the behind the scenes because especially when China shut their borders to recycled plastic, which really we were sending more than just our plastic. We were sending them basically plastic mixed with a whole lot of garbage too, and eventually they got tired of it and shut their borders. But that China used to be our biggest market for plastic. So now there's unfortunately, a lot of burning of plastic that's so-called recycled, and they call that recycling. I mean, Coca-Cola, when they say all our bottles are recyclable, they have whole collection systems that take that plastic. Like I said, it's basically the fossil fuel industry's plan B, as they're forced, as the need for fossil fuels goes down, they'll their hope is to, because they want to stay in business, uh, uh, their hope is to get control over the recycling industry and make sure that the plastic anyway is, and probably a lot of the paper too, is going to go to just burning. It's a sad state of affairs, and actually where I'm seeing it most, because I'm part of a coalition that's trying to push a concept called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility,
Mhm.
which is all about having the producers. We want the producers to pay for the material recovery, but our concern with having them in control of it is they'll make a deal with the fossil fuel industry and basically take all the everything they can from the recycling programs to put it into just burning for energy. So it's just something to keep an eye on.
Could I just make one comment
Yeah,
about the fossil fuel industry's plan B? I have always heard that to be produce plastic, and they're building plastic plants, and they're highly they're highly polluting, and of course they're done in low-income communities, and yeah, it is a nightmare,
yeah,
all for their profits.
yeah.
Barbara has her hand up. Barbara, you mentioned in the chat that you are a renter and can't get the landlord to replace gas appliances. I will tell you, we have a gas stove in our home, which we very, very rarely use. Several years ago, we got an inductive cooktop,
Mm.
just a simple cooktop. And one of the engineers calculated it uses 90% less energy than a regular traditional gas range. But my wife took it on as a Lenten challenge to only cook our meals using that small inductive cooktop. And we had wonderful, delicious meals without having to use gas at all. And you're probably aware of some of the reports of gas stoves causing all kinds of health hazards on top of
Absolutely.
everything else.
Yeah.
Barbara, what was your question?
But I certainly
Oh, but my question, oh,
appreciate and know the dilemmas of renters because
Yeah.
my bio, I think I mentioned that I I actually uh, I actually put together the first weatherization program in the country that was all about weatherizing people's homes. And the biggest challenge was again with the renters because you had to deal with the landlords. So I recognize the challenge.
yeah. The interesting thing is our landlord has solar panels on his house, but not on his properties.
So let me guess, you probably have to pay the utility costs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, my question was, uh, you haven't mentioned TerraCycle. Do you ever bring them up as an alternative way to get rid of stuff?
I do as a last resort.
Mhm.
TerraCycle is good to address what I consider composite materials. All that packaging that you may have noticed, too much packaging has this plastic with a foil liner on it. You can recycle the plastic, you can recycle the aluminum, but when they're fused together like that, it's very hard to recycle.
That's right. That's right.
TerraCycle does that for a fee.
Exactly.
So it's an option of last resort, I consider it. But I really try to avoid those composite materials
Mhm.
because yeah,
Sure. But it is an option. Yeah.
it is
At
an
least.
option.
And I think companies need to promote that more. You know, when I get things packaged, and it says that the container or the pouch or whatever is not recyclable, you know, they should be printing on their packaging is, well, you need to, you know, go to TerraCycle. They can help you recycle this supposedly non-recyclable thing. And so, you know, companies need to even companies that sell organic products need to take more responsibility to promote ways that people can recycle things.
Well, the theory is with EPR is if you get the producers, and this is not only the producers, the products themselves, but the packaging, of course.
Hmm.
If you require them to pay for the recovery of the material, then I foresee, because while TerraCycle can do it, it's much more expensive than regular recycling, if recycling of pure materials. So my sense
Yeah,
is with EPR, you'd be moving away from the need for things like for TerraCycle because TerraCycle is just more expensive.
yeah. There actually are some corporations that do take backs, and if you go to TerraCycle's website, I mean, you could spend a day there, but they list all the different companies that take back things. So if you find that those are products that you use, you can collect them and send them back to where they came from.
I would really like, because at least in New York State, we're still requiring our grocery stores and so forth to have a bin for plastic bags. Though if you look closely at the regulations that require that, it's not just plastic bags, it's basically film plastic in general.
Right.
And if they would provide bins for to collect the composite material, that would be helpful too. Basically paid for by like Lay's potato chips or something.
Yeah. We just
Mindy,
need more ingenious people to invent ways to, reuse, reprocess this stuff into other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mindy,
that's
could
last. I'll let other people talk.
yeah,
Uh,
Mindy
just-
had something in the chat that I'd like. Could you say a little bit more about what you have at your home?
Sure, I have a Ninja multi-cooker. It's a combined air crisper and pressure cooker, and I use it like 4 times a week. There's multiple people in my house that I feed. We do only vegetarian, but at times we do resort to the vegetarian chicken nuggets or what have you in desperation. But all of those things I cook in this plug-in countertop thing, and it saves a lot of energy. I don't use my oven much. I don't use my stove much because it cooks everything quickly and efficiently, and also healthier because you don't really need to use much oil. And one of my favorite things to do is cube up tofu, toss it in olive oil, salt, and pepper, and I make crispy tofu croutons in the
There you go.
air crisper. So if you're stuck and can't do much about your energy source, this is an option to conserve energy. I bought it off Amazon. It was under $200. So
I wonder if we could get some of these different, like Mindy has, or the simple cooktop that I have, and put them in church kitchens with demonstrations to encourage church members to continue, because the church is obviously more than the building, it's a people. And if we can get all the people to do this, all the better. So,
I like that. That sounds good.
other thoughts, comments? We're beyond the hour, so I want to be sensitive to people that want to sign off. Chris,
Just
any other final words?
just a chat from Jim. Industries that turn 5. Yes. Actually, it was interesting. I built my house myself and insulated it myself with cellulose insulation. The one problem is that it settled over time. So when I was in the market for solar panels, I took advantage of this energy audit and did that infrared picturing of my building. And sure enough, I could see the line of that cellulose insulation. So I had a professional come in to top it off because they can push the insulation in a much higher pressure, so avoid to reduce that settling. Anyway, I was just interested to see how much blue, you could tell that they were from recycled blue jeans in that fiber, so that they're mixing the paper fiber with fiber from recycled fiber clothes. Yeah.
Well,
So
friends,
you asked
a reminder, this is not the only event you should be, excuse me, looking at for this weekend. Tomorrow is the annual meeting for Presbyterians for Earth Care, and we would welcome your participation in that. Mindy, anything we should share about that in particular?
I'm going to put the link to our homepage in the chat because that's where the link is to the meeting tomorrow. Just go to presbyearthcare.org. It'll connect you right to the meeting. Eastern time, it starts at 4 p.m. And
Jane, you had a last
Yep,
question
Jane.
or comment? Jane, your hand is raised.
We
you're
are,
on mute.
PEC is giving out 3 awards tomorrow, and one of them is going to a 21-year-old who has started a refillery. So this is a location where you can get all your household products basically in your own containers. So you're not creating more plastic waste. You're reusing plastic waste essentially. So that would be an interesting thing, I think, for y'all to hear about.
Thanks, Jane.
I think I could be wrong, but my recollection is I'm actually included in the group that received the first Earth award for the Eco Justice Project, of which Earl was a part of too. But both Earl and I were a part of the Eco Justice Project that did a lot of the early work on connecting the dots between environmental justice and social justice. And so we're either the first one or the earlier one.
We're grateful that you're in it for the long haul, as well as Earl. Thank you. All right, my friends, I'll give you the best prayer to summarize. Lord, have mercy. Amen. Keep at it, everybody. Thank you. Again, thank you, Mindy, for helping make this possible. Chris, wonderful job. We will have this available for people to show to family, friends,